Hello, and welcome to this short presentation about the crypto fear and greed index. So, I've seen a lot of crypto YouTubers mention this index, and they're like, you need to be like Warren Buffett, buy when other people are fearful, and definitely sell when they're greedy. So, I was like, okay, but how much of this is actually like true? And then finally, we'll look into these two websites, bip.com and numer.ai, and these websites also have something to say about that. So, how is the index built up? Well, there's five basic categories that they created. There's volatility, so implying like if the volatility is high, it means we're likely at a bubble or high in the crypto chart. And similar to volume high means we're high, and momentum. So if we're going up, likely we're going to keep going up, and if we go down, likely it is that we're going to keep going down. And momentum is all a matter of what kind of time window you choose to look back at. So yeah, likely that there's some overfitting there. Then there is a social media score. So they look into Twitter, how many Bitcoin mentions are there, and the index. They say, okay, we can also add some other social media platforms if we want, or in the future, whatever is interesting, we can add to that score. Then there is the Bitcoin dominance. That basically means like, okay, the market cap of Bitcoin compared to all the other cryptos. And finally, what I find the most interesting one is Google Trend data. So if people Google something related to Bitcoin, like when Bitcoin moon, or Bitcoin, is it a bubble? Bitcoin, is it a fraud? You can all rank these searches from super fearful to extremely greedy, and then you can see how that goes over time. So they started this index early in 2018, and it's still going on as of today. Every day you get a point between 0 and 100. And so there's a bunch of articles where they have looked into this crypto fear and greed index to just compare it with the Bitcoin chart and see like, okay, how well does it predict? How well does it correlate? And you can see that, for example, when the chart is pretty low, so here's the fear and greed index, and when it's low, that would be a moment to buy. And if you look at the Bitcoin chart, then you can see that there is a bit of a problem with that. For example, here, that if you would have bought here, they had this drop all the way down to here. And then, yeah, let's say you bought here, that would have been a good moment. And then, this would be probably a moment to sell. So you would have sold here, etc. So yeah, it looks reasonable, but the question is like, how well does it actually predict? This is just this is just an indication with no hard data. So that's what I did. I looked into I compared the score of the fear and greed index with the return of the next day. So every day, the return of the next day compared to the index score. And what you get then is this scatter plot. And you can draw a line through it to see if there's any relation. And then you see, basically, this is e to the power minus 5. So it's a very small slope. You can see the red line is almost flat, meaning there's barely any relation with future return. That's not a particularly attractive thing. So I thought, okay, well, we looked into the next day. What about maybe next week instead of? So let's look over the whole week instead of just a day. And then you get this. And what's basically, it's a slightly stronger to the power of minus 4 instead of minus 5. But still, basically, the slope is almost 0. So almost no relation with return. However, that was still not an actual trading strategy simulated. So that's what I did as well. I figured like, okay, let's say we buy when people are super fearful, so at 20, and then we sell already when people get slightly greedy. And then you get a small return per day, similar to what we saw. And you have the shortest amount of trading days, because this is a conservative strategy, meaning we only use a signal when it's the strongest. When it's suggested that it has the most meaning. And if you do a more aggressive strategy, then you have more trading days. So you already start buying at when people get slightly fearful, and you only start selling when people are very greedy. And then the return is like pretty much the same. But what you do see, if you just were hodling over the entire period from February 2018, you would have had a lot more return. Meaning during these days, you have a low return, and during the other days, so 1300 minus these 800 or minus 1000, so about 500 to 300 days, those periods where the index would have not traded, that's where the return is generated. So you might as well flip this signal around. And that's maybe pretty interesting, something definitely to look into. So for this conclusion for this index, it's an index. There's 5 different variables brought in there, and actually even more if you look into those different variables. They're composed of different elements. So what you can actually do is take those elements apart and look at them individually, and that's what I want to do with you in the websites I'm going to show you. But first, a brief lesson is that it looks like it moves pretty well with the index, but you need to realize that correlation is not causation. So the correlation is there, but it doesn't mean there is a predictive value in there. So there's 2 websites that have a lot of data for you to look into, and it's free, so definitely have a look. So that's what we're gonna do. This is bip.com, and it has a wealth of data. For example, you can go to very core data like, okay, this is for the futures, the funding rate, which means if the funding rate is positive, longs pay the shorts for the futures, and if it's negative, then the shorts have to pay the longs. Every day this amount needs to be paid. So this could be a very core variable that you can analyze, and you can just take it from this website, and you need to maybe data crawl it. That's not what this video is about, but and here, for example, in the data section, there's a lot of interesting things to look into with what people probably will recognize from YouTubers who like to analyze this kind of data. So you can find it here, basically. For example, the bubble index, and then it's composed of, here's for example, Bitcoin Google Trends, very interesting. So here you could maybe download this data and then see if there's any predictive value in the Bitcoin Google Trends, or the mining difficulty. Well, this is just one of the data things. There's so much more to do. It's amazing. Volatility. So, okay. Some interesting things going on over here, maybe. Or not. And you see, like, because the charge explodes here, that it looks like there's almost nothing going on here. So you probably, for visual reference, you might use a log scale for that. So yeah, this website is free data, and it's a great source for a start of a research. Then there's numer.ai, which is if you want to take it to the next level, like analyzing variables, then this is a contest crypto coin as well, NMR. And they use a hedge fund, and they invest actually in these signals that you and I can generate. So you can make some sort of predictive score, and then they can use that score to invest. And you get rewarded if your score is well. And you can also stake NMR into your own score. So you can make money. They have a great data set, which is proprietary, where they invested a lot of money to make that sort of like open source. Not open source, but they made it free to use, but it's not clear what the data is, and that is actually the very remarkable thing about this data set. Is instead of having, for example, volume or you name it, what kind of variable, they have like feature one, and they made it anonymous. So what they did is like, okay, every score, instead of having a score of like 120 or they normalized it to between 0 and 1. And that way you can't derive from this number what kind of variable it must have been, and also it's not there in the column headers. And so these analysts, these quants, which you can be as well, they can analyze these variables without even knowing what they are. So yeah, that's how you can be very honest. And that's where I would like to leave this presentation. Have a look into these websites, and maybe you can find a lot of interesting things. There's also in the docs of numer.ai is a lot of interesting readings about where they teach you how to be a quant and what you need to look out for. So that can be really practical as well, such as like, okay, let's say you have a signal, but if a hedge fund wants to invest, they need that signal to last at least a couple days. So because if the hedge fund wants to invest 100 million, they cannot have a signal that already is disappeared in an hour. That would not be valuable because they have too much money and they would move the market too much. So those kind of things are very practical, and there's also very fundamental things you can learn there, such as like, okay, when are you overfitting data? When are you when is there? Can you get more out of your data? How to neutralize your data for other variables. All right, I'm gonna leave it here. Good luck.